have corgis. Hi, this is Sally Morgan, craniosacral therapist, physical therapist, and Tellington T-Touch practitioner for animals and people. This is Tristan. He's a corgi, and we're here for episode 235 of Conversations with a Corgi. I just can't even believe we've done that many, and of course my sister's done like 400. But anyway, we are going to continue our discussion today about some of the treatments you can use to work with fascia in the body. And I hope everybody had a good Valentine's Day. Tristan and I did. We got some special cookies from the dog store, which he has not yet eaten, but he will today. So we're going to today talk about myotherapy, not to be confused with myofascial therapy. Myofascial therapy, because of the name, implies working with the muscles and the fascia. And so it's a different kind of technique, that triplanar technique we talked about. And remember, fascia is a tissue that surrounds, protects, and supports every single part of the body. So doing something to help with the fascia in your pet or your horse or yourself can be profoundly helpful for your entire system. So today we're going to talk about myotherapy, which has the word myo in it, or the phrase myo, which comes from muscle again. And myotherapy was developed in the 70s by a person named Bonnie Pruden. And there were many people in my area here in Western Mass that studied with her. And it has become a very popular type of what we call manual therapy, which is what I do, which is a whole variety of hands-on therapy. So, and myotherapy, like so many things, like just massage in general, has grown to encompass many techniques, because the people that do these techniques don't do just one thing, because really not one thing works in every case. So lots of them now use cold laser and something called muscle energy, which I also do, and massage and acupressure, TENS, hot and cold packs, exercise, nutritional advice. So they really run the whole spectrum of possibilities here when you go to a myotherapist. But what myotherapy initially was, and still is in its strictest sense, is a kind of trigger point therapy, which was originally developed by Travell and Simons. I've never even heard of them before. I didn't know there was a predecessor to Bonnie, but Travell and Simons, who looked at the treatment and cause of pain arising from myofascial trigger points. Now, to have fibromyalgia, they talk about you having a certain number on particular placement of these so-called trigger points, which means these are hyperactive, injured, sore, painful areas in your body. I can't say that I've ever seen fibromyalgia in an animal, but I'm sure the potential exists for some horses to have it. We just don't work our dogs in ways that would develop this in them. So again, we get back to the idea of the trigger points. So the initial therapy was developed as a way to manage those trigger points, which become so painful and so recurrent. And lots of people have 3 or 4 of them. I think you have to have at least 21 in certain areas to be considered a person with fibromyalgia. And certainly there's another similar thing called myofascial pain syndrome, which again is just inflammation in all these muscles and joints and fascia in the body. So what is the original form of trigger point therapy that they use? I've mentioned this a few times on these Conversations with the Corgis, and having had this only once, I don't know as much about it as I do some other things, but I know plenty of people who practice it. And the idea behind myotherapy is to apply pressure to that trigger point and just do that in such a deep, firm way that the cells are deprived of oxygen. And then when you relieve the pressure and they turn back on, they are supposed to turn back on in a more functional way. And this is a direct technique. It's an invasive technique. And as we pointed out when I talked about Dr. Bernie Siegel doing surgery, you know, his work can, because of the way he does surgery, as much as it sounds like an invasive technique, you know, cutting into the body and all of that, because he's dialoguing with the body, respectful of the body, really cognizant that that body on the table is an actual person with family members and relatives and somebody's son and daughter, he is a very different kind of surgeon than some other surgeons. And the same can be true with myotherapy. So as much as it's an invasive treatment just by its nature, like chiropractic or surgery, you're really going into that tissue in a very deep, often painful way. It does not mean that it does not work, and it does not mean that it's not a good idea to get this kind of therapy if you need it. So I have found that the trigger point work has been really helpful for what we call heavily muscled humans, not like marathon runners, but like weightlifters, and also people that have had something like a very, very bad car accident where their whole body is just in such a sense of guarding that they can't release enough to tolerate some of the other kinds of therapy. And so going directly into the pain is actually tolerable to them and beneficial. So that's a little bit about myotherapy. And then, you know, it incorporates this trigger point therapy. And the trigger points are not necessarily over acupuncture points. They have some associations with a variety of acupuncture points. And I think it's to their credit that a lot of myotherapists incorporate nutrition and massage and exercise and hot and cold therapy into their protocol, because you really need all of these things to get a full release of something that's been stuck a long time or that has layers of restriction, maybe 2 or 3 accidents, emotional layers, spiritual layers, and traumatic events all incorporated in the holding in these trigger points. I mean, I've had some dogs with really tight shoulder muscles and cats, but I wouldn't necessarily call them a frank trigger point. So you're not going to see this so much in your dogs and cats, and I've seen some horses with some trigger points, especially if they've been ridden repetitively in a particular way for a very long time, a long time each day. You know, sometimes, well, a while ago I worked with a pony that had been on one of those little machines at the fairs, walking in circles all day with children, and he was very restricted in his neck and shoulder, and I would say that he had trigger points. So the trigger point therapy is just one part of it, and lots of people that do myotherapy also follow it up with some of the techniques of massage, where you're relieving the soft tissue around the trigger point so that it doesn't snap back into a trigger point as soon as you're done releasing the trigger point. So as I said, myotherapy is used for a lot of common musculoskeletal conditions that come from poor posture, poor body mechanics, and poor injury. And it can really help in your overall biomechanical functioning, because once you develop these trigger points, like I have one that comes and goes in my left shoulder, and if it's cold and I'm taking a walk and I feel cold, that shoulder automatically hikes up and I get this improper mechanics and posture, and then it just spasms so much that if I don't jump right on it when I get back in the house and become mentally aware that it's happening, it can really spasm and cause me tremendous trouble. And one of the things I've used to relieve trigger points with great luck on lots of people and animals and myself are the tuning forks. The tuning forks have that vibration that puts a little bit of movement in a stuck tissue and really can bring about a lot of relief. So you know, I don't know any myotherapists that are using tuning forks. This is a new kind of treatment for a lot of animals and people, and not many people use tuning forks the way that I do. But I think they would be a good adjunct therapy for a myotherapist to add into their treatments. And a lot of myotherapists will look at the tissues around the trigger points, the movement, the gait, the postural assessment. It's like going in for a full orthopedic eval, just like it would be going to a craniosacral therapist or a massage therapist. They really want to look at all the symptoms you have and look at the whole history of what's going on with your body. Now, myotherapy was originally based on the work of a woman named Janet Travell, who I do know, who established the neurophysiological basis of myofascial pain and dysfunction. And we really owe a lot to Janet Travell and her work about fascia and myofascial pain. And Bonnie Pruden was a fitness expert and an author, and she created her system of myotherapy based on Janet Travell's work. And boy, 20 years ago, I know people that actually studied with Janet Travell, and what an opportunity that was for them. So, and when you're doing this myotherapy, often it's nice to use hot packs to soften the area before you put in that direct pressure, and then cold packs to kind of quiet down all the tension in the area after the treatment. So those are often included in a myotherapy treatment. And then they also do myofascial stretching, which can look like Thai massage or a lot of massage techniques, because you really, and even Pilates in a way, because with myofascial stretching, you really want to elongate the muscle fibers. And remember, we talked about the fascia getting bunched up like gum in your hair like this when it's dysfunctional. And you need that elongation to get those fibers lined up and all going in the correct direction in correspondence to each other, especially over those changes in the body we looked at when we looked at craniosacral therapy techniques for fascia. At the lumbar sacral junction, the sacral lumbar junction, the thoracic lumbar junction. I said that twice, 2 different ways. Isn't that funny? And it's interesting, in human and veterinary medicine, they're often flip-flopped. You know, what we might have, like the occip, the OA in human talk is often the AO in veterinary medicine. So anyway, you look at the junction between the neck and the head, the neck and the shoulder vertebrae, the thoracic vertebrae, and then the connection between the thoracic and the lumbar vertebrae, and lumbar and sacral. And those are the areas where the fascia changes patterns from horizontal to more vertical. And also there's a lot of tension on the spinal segments because they're supporting all the organs of the body, no matter you're a human or a dog or a horse. And so it's really important to look at getting those fibers functionally aligned. And that is really the basis for why some things are really successful and some treatments are not successful. When you have pain, you really need to work with the fascial layer to relieve that pain and tension. And if you don't have a technique that addresses that, then you've still got some residual things going on. So it's really important to look at elongating those muscle fibers, and also that will increase the range of motion in the joint, and it will help you prevent having future injuries. My shoulder has gotten so much better now that when I do use it dysfunctionally, like when it's going like in my ear, usually when I'm cold, it doesn't do it anymore when I'm tense, or if I've had to lift something heavy, sometimes it'll do that. It goes into a protective mode. And I am able to, because it has more range of motion than it used to have, I'm able to work it out 99% of the time. So techniques in myotherapy often include static stretching and dynamic stretching. So you're stretching while you're moving, and you're also stretching while not moving. And then also some neuromuscular facilitation stretching called PNF. And that's a particular pattern that we use in physical therapy most often, where you move the joints of the body, like coming across the body and opening up this way, and then the legs are coordinating with it. And it's a specific pattern. It's similar to Feldenkrais in a way, because you're moving the limbs in a way that is to allow them to become aware of their range of function and movement and extension and flexion that is very functional, because these are patterns of movement that we have throughout the day, just moving our bodies normally. And PNF, this proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation stretching or therapy, has been really useful for people after car accidents and people that have like muscular problems like cerebral palsy and neuromuscular problems like muscular dystrophy and things. These PNF patterns can be profoundly helpful, and so helpful indeed that I have incorporated some variations of them into the classes I teach for seniors with yoga, because these patterns really are really, what's the word? They're like biologically coming from your most earliest patterns of movement as a child. And so going back into that and reminding the body of a functional way of moving can be really, really helpful. So that is something that's often used in conjunction with myotherapy, because again, you're getting into that area of dysfunction, but you've got to retrain it how to move in a functional way and to remember its patterns of normal movement. Because once you have something like my thing with my shoulder, you start to move it all the time in an awkward way. And all of us have seen people that have neck injuries that have learned to protect their neck by going like this when they turn to talk to you instead of turning their head. So these are the kinds of patterns that can lead to problems maybe in your back or your low back over time. And so certainly myotherapy can address that. And I do know some people that do techniques of myotherapy with horses. I am not one of them because I have other techniques that work for the same kinds of issues, and they're more in alignment with my philosophy and what I do. But I don't know anybody doing myotherapy with dogs. And as I said, I don't think it happens so much in dogs. Their bodies are different, and I don't think we work dogs as hard as we do our horses. I'm sure in places where dogs still, like sled dogs, do really serious work and longer distances and conditions than what people would prefer for them, they may indeed have issues that could be well treated with myotherapy. So that's a little look at myotherapy today as a treatment you might explore for fascial restrictions in your dog or your horse. And we will be back for another episode of Conversations with a Corgi tomorrow and Saturday and Sunday. And I think possibly in this next period of time, I have a few more techniques to talk about with fascia particularly. I have a whole lot of just random techniques that I want to just tell you about, but I'm also really thinking about kind of a series about horses and how we ride them, because it's come to my attention through talking with some other leaders in the horse industry and horse training that there are some issues that need to be brought to the fore about the physiologic impacts of some of the training methods that we use. And I don't know if I will do that as a separate thing or if I will make that part of Conversations with a Corgi, but if you are a horse person, you will really want to hear this. And I may just do sort of a long Facebook Live as a separate thing about this, or a couple of shorter ones. I'm not really sure the best format for it yet, but I do see a tremendous need for education in this particular area. So, more to come on that later. Thanks for joining us today. It's going to be warm here today. Tristan and I have a pretty nice day planned. And I do want to talk to you guys about the dog that I saw yesterday, and that will probably be tomorrow. Oh, Danny, they're saying it's going to get really cold up where you are again. Hi, Debbie. We're getting a few inches of snow Saturday. Not looking forward to any more shoveling, but, you know, at this time of year, it's to be expected. Thanks for joining us today. Everybody have a great day. Take good care of your fascia. We'll see you soon.